So yeah guys, welcome back. So today we're talking about my first flip project out in Redlands, California. I wanted to kind of give you guys the insight into sort of what it was like buying the first house ever at 24 and sort of the biggest takeaways that I had during the process of flipping the project. So to kind of give you guys just the entire understanding of what happened, right? The first thing that actually happened was my partner Lena and I. Now Lena's actually a lot older. She's in her 70s or 80s. And she's been flipping houses for quite a while, so she was definitely the more experienced, more seasoned investor out of both of us. But for me, this was really my first flip, so I had to kind of go into it and be super, be like a student of the game almost, like fully just kind of engross myself, be there with my fucking notebook all the time and sort of just like take everything in. And I think the biggest thing for me was trying to figure out how I could sort of iron out the problems that I was because I knew there was gonna be hundreds and hundreds of problems, but I was like, how do I kind of like, take these problems, find the solutions so that moving forward when I'm building systems around, getting to a place of flipping 5 to 10 houses at a time, you're gonna have to hire out a lot of different people. You gotta have all the investors, the lenders, the right team, the contractors, everybody, and sort of, if you're having problems in the first project, you're going to have them on the next 10, right? So how do you sort of iron out those problems initially? So that's kind of what my biggest thing going into it was. I wasn't really concerned about actually making money. It wasn't really about, making a profit, which, I'm going to kind of get into sort of, what was the money that I actually made on the deal. So anyways, I want to kind of back it up. So the first thing was finding the deal. This was back in October of 2020, obviously mid-pandemic. Doing my first flip was definitely intimidating. I was like, because at that point I had sold maybe 4 to 5 houses, but I wasn't sure if I was really ready because I was putting in quite a bit of capital, just of my own. And I was also raising money from family and friends for the actual purchase of the property, right? Because when you buy a property, that property, we purchased it for $375K. You're not putting in $375K of your own money. You have to go out and raise the rest from a cash investor. You can use hard money, private money. There's a lot of different ways you could go about it, and also talk about the different financing options. But we went the route of doing a cash investor at a low interest rate. So, we did, the purchase price was $375. And before I even actually get into that, it was like, I think had maybe 10 to 15 offers out before we even locked in anything, right? So like we had I think it was like 12 offers, and everything was just getting rejected because you're competing with a lot of different cash investors, people that have, 500-600K sitting in the bank that they literally have ready for their next project. Like, when you don't have that kind of money and you're just using, you're basically getting a loan with hard money, it becomes a little bit more difficult. In our case, we actually were a cash offer, so we weren't going the hard money route of, high interest rate loan. We were literally just, leveraging the cash. So we were cash buyers, but the issue was I was not experienced and I was a little bit hesitant, right? So I was kind of a roadblock for us initially, but sort of what happened was, we found this property. We actually put in our offer 25K over asking. So the asking price, I believe, was around $350 or something like that, and we bought it for $375. So I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned initially was you have to be competitive with your offers. A lot of times the way that the agents will price the properties is they'll kind of start super low, right? So if the market value of the property is $300K, they'll list it at $250 because they know that it's going to cause, sort of a bidding war, right? So that was the biggest thing initially was like, we felt weird. I felt weird offering $25,000 over the asking price, but, based on the other 10 rejected offers, that was sort of what I learned was like, you have to kind of just be competitive. So anyways, we went in, we offered $375, and they did a counter. We got it accepted. We got all the terms ironed out. It was like a 3% EMD. EMD is an earnest money deposit, so you have to sort of deposit money into escrow to open escrow. So initially, we used Portfolio Escrow, which is Douglas Elliman, which is my brokerage. That's their preferred escrow company, and they were great. Big shout out to Maria and Anna and the whole team. But I think that was, we got into escrow. This was in October. It was a pretty quick escrow. I think it was like 10 days, obviously, because when you're doing an investment project, you sort of like everything that you're doing, you're kind of just like fighting against the clock, right? Like the whole thing, especially mid-pandemic, was we wanted to get in this property, like get in there, fix it up, and get out, right? So when we actually made our offer, we actually said, contingent upon once we open escrow, that we can actually get our team of contractors actually in the property to like begin the work immediately. So the seller was hesitant. There was actually a bunch of crap going on with the seller. So the seller was an elderly woman actually being abused by her caregiver. So there was like a restraining order against the the caregiver. There was, I mean, if you guys look it up, the property's 339 Mitchell Way in Redlands, California. If you go back and look at the old listing, you'll see the pictures of the property. I mean, it was in terrible condition. Like, people, I think there was like holes in the wall because the dude was probably punching it. There was like syringes in the attic. It was a pretty intense situation. So the seller said, no, unfortunately, like you have to wait until you close escrow. So that was the biggest thing for me initially, was like, damn, like I really wanted to get our team in the property to like start, right? So we couldn't do that, which was fine. We lost a little bit of time, but actually, let me talk about this real quick. In terms of finding the actual team, right? Like I had never flipped a property in Redlands. My partner Lena never flipped a property in Redlands. So we were kind of trying to figure out, how do we line up the few important things initially, right? So I think I've talked about this before. The biggest things that you guys want to line up when you're looking at a flip is the financing. So are you doing hard money? Are you going cash? The second thing is the actual team of workers. Are you using a licensed GC, which is a licensed general contractor? Are you going the route of handymen? And we kind of did a mix of both. Obviously, handymen are going to be cheaper than using sort of a licensed GC. So we went the route of using the handyman, and we actually found these amazing guys, J&S Contractors. Big shout out to Johnny, who they did work of a licensed GC, but they weren't licensed. So we ended up bringing out maybe 5 to 6 different contractors to the property once we were in escrow. We took their quotes, and initially our goal, to kind of tell you guys about the spread, was to purchase it at about $375, put it in about $20K. So really just minimal, simple rehab, cosmetic only, because the kitchen was already sort of completed. All we really wanted to do was change out the flooring, paint everything, fix up the sunroom that was in the back, and like that's pretty much it. Like that's really all we wanted to do. But obviously that's not how it goes. So I'll get into kind of what we actually ended up spending. But our spread was, we wanted to buy it. We bought it at $375, $20K sort of rehab, and then $475 was our exit point. So that's about $100K spread minus expenses, closing costs, etc. Right? So we were thinking maybe we'll make, 20, 30K a pop between me, my partner, and our investor. Plus, my partner and I would make money from the commissions of the purchase of the property plus the sale of the property. So that was the key for me, was being the agent. I could save money on that front. So that's why I kind of convinced myself that it was okay to pay $25K, above asking. So anyways, where were we then? Let's see. So anyways, yeah, so we got the contractors in, we started getting quotes. The quotes from the contractors kind of ranged from like, $30K to like $60K when it was a GC, because they charge a lot more for their work. Plus we wanted it done quick. So everything was like 30 to like 60K. And we were like, this is ridiculous, because we really wanted to get in and out like at 20,000. So we ended up finding Johnny. I think they came to us and they said, it's going to be 25K or something. And then we actually ended up just cutting out a bunch of the work to get it down to like $9,000, right? So we got him at $9,000, we got him in the property, started doing the work. We also had a different team for the doors, the attic panels, for the backyard, the gardener. There's a lot of different areas of work that needed to be done, and we needed different people for that. So my biggest thing was using Yelp, literally just using Yelp and trying to find like the best workers, looking at the reviews, all that stuff. So that was the biggest thing. The other thing that was a really big challenge for me was the property was in Redlands. I live in LA. That's like an hour and a half drive, right? So I was spending a lot of time out at Redlands. Big shout out to Efren, who let me stay at his place a couple times. There was even a couple nights where I had to get a hotel because I didn't want to drive back. Traffic is like 2 hours. So if I could actually go back, I would do a flip closer to LA. But it's more pricey out here. Obviously, it's a higher entry level. So that's where it kind of made it a little bit more difficult. But anyways, yeah, so we got them in the property. They started doing the work. Oh yeah, we closed escrow. We got the keys. Super excited by my first house. Obviously, I was pumped. But now like the stress began, right? Because we're like fighting against the clock with COVID. We're like, shit, when's the market gonna drop? Like all this crazy stuff's going on in the stock market, politics. We weren't sure if everything was just gonna, just burst and like we would just lose our shirt, right? So, we got in, we did the work. It took us about a month to get everything completed. I think early December is when we listed the property. Now this was right before Christmas. So in real estate, you kind of just think of it seasonally, right? Like people in December are like spending time, November, December, it's, end of the year, people are like traveling for the holidays. no one's really looking at buying. Not people are looking at buying houses, but obviously in the summer you're more likely to like get more volume in terms of buyers. The good thing that played in our advantage though is mortgage rates are obviously at their all-time low, so you do have more buyers just because of that, right? So we we listed the property. We listed it at I think it was 475, which was our plan initially. But to kind of tell you guys about the cost, total the rehab cost us about what was it? I think about 30 to 35K. So we bought it at 375. We put in 35K plus, between me and my partner Lena, plus we had put in 5% each, so 10% down payment. So I had put in about 19K of my own money, plus about 15 for the rehab. So that was about like 34K each. So she was in 34, I was in about 34, and then our investor was obviously in the rest, like the 342,000. So just basically looking at it from the point of like our cost, right? So our cost of 375 plus about 35,000 in rehab, we're already up at like 410, and if our exit point is 475, like that's already a very slim margin, and that's not even taking into consideration closing costs when you sell the property. You have to pay escrow, title, insurance, home warranties, like all these things add up, right? Commissions, etc. So we were kind of at a point of like, shit, like we're probably only gonna make 15 to 20K. For Lena, it was a bummer, not a bummer, but like she obviously wanted to make a lot more. For me, it was fine because I was happy to even just like break even on my first deal. But anyways, we ended up getting into escrow. I'm trying to remember, I think we had to cancel it because the buyers, it was first time buyers, I think they backed out. And that happens all the time, and that, you know, as a realtor, you'll kind of just like, you'll kind of just deal with it as it comes, and you kind of have to like, there's ways to save deals, but sometimes you have to realize that like the effort has to come from all parties, you know what I mean? Like you can't be so pushy to like convince somebody to go buy a house that they don't want anymore, right? So that was the one thing we dealt with, was a canceled escrow. Then we got back into escrow, and the next challenge was the contingencies, right? So if you guys don't know what contingencies are, there's three main contingencies in an escrow period. Those are the inspection contingency, the loan contingency, and the appraisal contingency, right? So what does that mean, right? It basically means that, you know, when a buyer gets into a contract with a seller, they have to like go do their due diligence, right? So they have to get their inspector out there. Typically they'll have 7 to 10 days to do the inspection. And let's say something comes up, let's say there's a faulty foundation or there's like a massive termite issue. Before they remove those contingencies, they have the right to get their deposit back even if they cancel escrow because of those things, right? So the issue for buyers becomes when you remove all your contingencies. So let's say you've done your inspection, you've done your appraisal, you know, your loan's been conditionally approved, then you decide, you know what, we're closing on the property, let's remove all our contingencies, and then for some reason something comes up and you as the buyer decide that you don't want to pursue the property anymore, you've then put your EMD at risk, your earnest money deposit, which will likely get taken then by the seller. You know, sometimes you have to go to mediation, arbitration, whatever, but we got to a point where the inspector came out from, you know, on our second escrow, they did the inspection, and there was a lot of like really minor stuff, right? So at that point it came to, do we want to do a seller credit where we're actually giving the buyers credit for those repairs so that when we close escrow they could just take that money and do the repairs themselves? Or would it have been more cost effective to just do the repairs and just like pay for it, you know, instead of giving them a credit, right? So for us, it made more sense to actually just do all the repairs because it was like it was like literally like 50 minor things, like small stuff like repairing electrical outlets, stuff like that. So we ended up paying like $1,500 or something for for those repairs, which is actually pretty great. Like we thought it was gonna be like $5-6 grand, but we got it done cheap. And then so they removed the inspection contingency. The next thing was the appraisal contingency, which is the appraiser has to come out and sort of give, you know, their value on the property. They have to use the sales comparison approach. They look at the different comps in the areas. So this was our biggest concern because Redlands is an area where, you know, the values of the properties right now are going steadily up, but like, you know, 475 is definitely like not conservative, right? So it ended up appraising at 465, which is about 10K under our you know, our asking price. So that became the issue next of, the buyers obviously with their bank was Chase Bank. The lender's not going to finance a property above the appraised value, right? Because if it's worth 465, why would they, finance up to 475? So then the buyers came back and said, hey, we want to reduce the asking price to the appraised value of 465. So now Lena and I came to a point of like, do we want to actually, I'm recording a YouTube video, which is why I'm not looking at you guys, just FYI, but we got to a point of like, do we want to actually do we want to reduce the asking price, or I'm sorry, the purchase price to 465, or do we want to, try and counter the appraisal? So maybe there was some things in the appraisal that weren't correct, or that could have been manipulated, or that just were false, or whatever. But we actually, from myself working in hard money for the last year and a half, like I know a lot about appraisals and sort of like what to look for and how to know if it's really accurate. Because at the end of the day, an appraisal is just an opinion of one person. That's obviously very seasoned and licensed to do that, but we ended up looking in depth at the appraisal, and there was actually nothing really wrong with it. Like the comps checked out. He used the right comps. All the comps were within like a half a mile from the property. Similar size, similar sort of quality of work, etc. So we decided, we just wanted to kind of get out of the deal. Like we wanted to literally just close escrow, get our money, and get out. So we brought it down to 465. And then the last thing was the loan contingency. And this is kind of where things get like stressful, because you're like, you're so close to closing, you're like a week out or like 10 days out, but the bank is kind of like silent, because the bank has to do their underwriting. They have an underwriter internally that has to go through sort of the file and look at the buyers, make sure that they're qualified, look at the bank statements, the income, their jobs, etc. So we're kind of just in a waiting period of like, is the file approved? Is it not approved? And then to make it even worse, when the lender representative, whoever's working at the bank, doesn't respond to your emails, isn't picking up the phone, doesn't respond to texts, you're kind of just left in the dark. And this was interesting for me because, typically I'm representing the buyers and sellers. I'd never actually been the actual seller or owner of the property. So I was now dealing with the stress of being the seller, but also of being the agent, right? So like a lot of this, as me being the agent, was in my hands to like try and navigate the deal and get it closed. But then there was also the stress of like actually owning the property, right? So that was interesting, but ended up just kind of being clear. We got the file, or the file got cleared like a couple days late, so we had to give them an extension. But yeah, we ended up closing escrow. This was about a week ago for 465. We bought it at 475. So our overall profit was actually pretty slim. It was about 16,000 collectively, right? But the great thing was, so just to kind of break it down, like we made 16K with our investor. We gave them a third of the profit split. So they made 5 to 6 grand on the profit. We also paid them 5% interest per month. So they made about $1,500 per month while we were holding the property. So they got about a 3 to 4% return on their money, which obviously, better than sitting in the bank, but, and obviously our investor also was not doing so hot in the stock market. So for him, it was like 3 to 4% is a great return. So he was happy at the end of the day. I made my 5 to 6K on the profit, plus my money back, obviously, from the down payment, plus the rehab costs, about 35K, plus the profit, plus the buy and sell commission. So for me, this deal was actually great because, like, I learned a shit ton, right? Like I connected with all the contractors. I figured out how to actually use a cash investor. Just like being at the property, like seeing everything happen. Like I learned so much from that. And then also like, we made money on the commissions, right?